everybody, this is Max, and welcome to Terraria, but I can't use any storage chests, and I can only use my own inventory. In addition, all the music you will hear in this video is my own original music created by me. Now, just to get things straight, this is a inventory-themed challenge, not a what items can I use type of challenge. So when I say no chests, what I mean is that I will still find chests out in the wild and take stuff from them, but I won't use any chests to organize and keep anything long-term. I'm only allowed to keep whatever items I can fit in my inventory. So the main challenges are thinking carefully about what to pick up and actually hold on to temporarily, and even more significantly, when to get rid of stuff. Now, we are going to be playing on classic difficulty mode because while I do love Terraria, that doesn't necessarily mean I am any good at it. Alright, so we are starting off with some basic tasks, but quickly realize that we are totally boxed in by the corruption on the right, and actually the unbelievably close jungle on the left, which was pretty shocking. I do find this living tree and get a pipeline straight to a house for a cloud in a bottle, giving us our first useful item. Next, I diced to some eaters twice, and ultimately used some bombs to acquire a super early musket, giving us a much better weapon. By the way, a couple other things I got during those first adventures were the Finch Staff for a fun early summon, and the Shadow Orb Light Pad. Okay, so the next task on my list was to construct some houses for NPCs to use, and I went with an underground set of 3 small rooms in order to preserve the nice flat terrain on the surface for fighting enemies more easily. At one point I ran out of stone for more walls, so I went to do a bit of mining and died instantly to some jungle enemies due to the jungle being very close to my spawn. When I respawned, I finished my first 3 houses, and after a bit of inventory management, I headed left through the jungle to build some jungle houses that I could use for NPCs later and a pylon eventually. I returned home, did some more mining, nearly drowned, fell to my death a couple times, found myself back in the jungle and died instantly, though I did get a magic mirror along the way. Since the jungle was really right on my doorstep, I still wanted to try getting some super early jungle loot, so I headed back down to the mines below my spawn. I tried getting some normal cave loot as well, and I did find some ores before reaching the jungle again. I got some jungle spores, and this is where I really wanted to commit to the jungle because one of the main sort of things that happens when I don't use storage chests is I end up doing different areas kind of one at a time because, I want to get all the materials and stuff from one area, use it for crafting until I have everything I want, and then trash the stuff so that those things aren't clogging up my limited inventory space. So now that I had some spores, I really wanted to try to get all my jungle stuff done early. So yeah, I was just cautiously chugging along in the jungle. I got a life crystal too, which was huge, and ultimately ended up at this house. Now, at first I was excited because there was this house that gave me a mace, which was better than my random starting sword, and it had open space to the left to spawn enemies, so I thought I could have a bit of jungle enemy farming by hiding out in the house and killing stuff that spawns one by one, harvesting materials along the way. But sadly, my amateurish skills led to my untimely demise in this pool of lava. At that point, I had not killed enough of the enemies to get enough stingers to make any of the good jungle weapons, but I did have enough of the spores and vines to make the Ivy Whip, my first grappling hook, which is still a great takeaway, and I thought I could come back to the jungle for weapons later, and taking up 2 inventory slots with spores and vines wasn't that much of a sacrifice early game anyway. So then I just wanted to map out more of the surface, so I explored to the left, I ended up with good information about the world, and I also upgraded the mace to a flaming mace, and interestingly, I found the tridents, which I've never really used much before, but it has this cool effect where if you are holding it, you move more freely underwater. So I pulled it out whenever I encountered a lot of water, and it ended up being pretty fun to zoom around underwater. When I reached the left ocean, I built a set of houses there for a future ocean community with a pylon. I then returned home and repeated this process towards the right. I found this little area here after the corruption and got some mediocre loot in the living trees. And then, more importantly, I located the snow biome and set up my snow houses for the eventual pylon there. After setting up these snow houses, I visited the merchant to buy a piggy bank. Now, this might be considered breaking the rules since I am going to use it to store something, but the thing is, I'm only going to use it to store money, nothing else. And I just found it so annoying to lose tons of money every time I died, and I would rather just keep my money safe in the piggy bank, even if I have to bend the rules of the challenge. It is a self-imposed challenge after all, so I can decide how it works. Now, I've been messing around with shallow mining and exploring the surface a lot, so I was feeling antsy to make some real progress. But before I could fight bosses, I needed some more HP, so I went on a big mining expedition with the goal of getting life crystals. Along the way, I also got plenty of ores, and I was using one of my inventory slots for gold ore because later I would be able to use it for one of the best utility potions in the game, the Spelunker potion. So I was particularly excited to find any gold, as well as lead, which I would need for a whole bunch of different items, and the Iron Skin potion. Something interesting that happened is I ended up encountering Tim down here and killed them for a wizard hat to keep until I got some real armor later. Then I went straight for this jackpot, the glowing mushroom biome, which was a big open area with 2 of the much needed life crystals, plus a lot more gold ore as well. All in all, this mining expedition was great. I got a lot more HP and I had a lot of fun too. Next, since I had just been to the mushroom biome, I had some mushroom seeds, so I decided to set up a surface mushroom biome in case I wanted the truffle NPC later in hard mode, but I put it way too close to the corruption, so it ended up being a complete waste, and I never used it even in hard mode. Oops. I returned home and spent some of my gold on a gold pickaxe to speed things up while exploring, and a gold watch to tell me the in-game time. Armed with these new upgrades, I set my sights on the jungle again. So, after a little more random stuff, I set out that evening for the jungle. But the game had other plans for me and gave me a natural spawn for the Eye of Cthulhu. With this threat coming in, I hastily constructed a rudimentary arena for the battle, consisting of simply some elevated wood platforms and a campfire for some HP regen. Luckily, classic mode Eye of Cthulhu is quite easy to take down with the musket, even for an amateur like myself, so enjoy the first successful boss fight of the run. After defeating the boss, I was rewarded of course with some Demonite. I wasted no time at all and instantly crafted the powerful Light's Bane, which is a sword I really enjoy using. With this thing I was now definitely ready to dominate the puny jungle enemies, so I headed off to the jungle immediately. While I raid the jungle, I thought it would be a good time to analyze my inventory as it stands now, at this post-Eye of Cthulhu milestone. So, I'm going to pull up a screenshot of the inventory with the jungle raid footage in the corner. Okay, so I have 50 total slots available, plus 4 more slots that only work for ammo. The top 10 outlined in red are my hotbar, and this is actually how I always do my hotbar. It has a close range weapon in slot 1, tools in slots 2 and 3, a ranged weapon in slot 4, flexible secondary weapon slots, which are in 5 and 6, torches in 7, bombs in 8, platforms in 9, and ropes in 10. Actually, slots 8 through 9 might be different sometimes. I actually don't keep bombs up there very much, and sometimes I have blocks. But anyway, yeah, that's my hotbar preferences. Next category is ores, outlined in yellow, so these I'm keeping for various reasons. Gold is mainly for spelunker potions, plus maybe a king slime summon at some point. Lead is for iron skin potions, but more importantly for the mechanical boss summons in hard mode. Silver I've been keeping on me since early game just because I found a ton of it for some reason. I was originally thinking about making armor or maybe silver bullets, but I think I never did either one and just sold them at some point. Oh yeah, that's another thing I should mention. I tried to remember throughout this playthrough to actually sell things instead of just trashing them, if I could remember. Next up in green, we have potions and potion ingredients, plus my hammer, because I was too lazy to make all these outlines go around the hammer. So I had a bunch of herbs and seeds to use to make potions. So potions are a tricky thing in this playthrough because they all use different things, and I can't keep stacks of every possible ingredient around. So I kind of had to prioritize certain potions and just forget about the rest. I definitely prioritized spelunker potions, so I absolutely needed to keep ore, gold ore, blink roots, and moon glows, and I also wanted regeneration and iron skin potions for defense during tricky boss fights, so I kept lead ore, mushrooms, and dayblooms. The extra bonus was that dayblooms are featured in both of these recipes, so it was like an extra value for the 2 inventory slots of dayblooms and daybloom seeds. Now, once I got the Dryad, I would be able to buy planter boxes and I would save a ton of room in my inventory because I could get rid of all the seeds by planting them, which was going to be huge once that happened. Anyway, some of the other herbs I probably ended up trashing or selling because I didn't really want to do fishing this playthrough, so I wasn't going to end up using them for potions anyway. Now, my real strategy that made me feel like a smart gamer was keeping recall potions. I don't need them because I had the magic beer, but I knew that once I eventually got the Shimmer, I could use Shimmer to decraft them and get a ton of dayblooms, allowing me to stock up on iron skin and regeneration potions, so that was my long-term plan for that. Another thing I was saving for the Shimmer was the fruit to get one of those permanent upgrades that the Shimmer offers. The last color-coded category of stuff is in orange, and this is the crafting materials section. It has both some long-term stuff and short-term flexible stuff. First, my magic mirror, because I was again lazy with the outlines. So the only long-term thing I really have right now is rotten chunks, which I will ultimately need for the mechanical worm to summon the destroyer in hard mode. Later, I will collect bones and lenses for the same reason, summoning the mechanical bosses. And then currently in these short-term flex slots, I have jungle stuff right now, stingers, spores, and vines. After my current jungle raid, I will craft a ton of jungle items and then clear those things out of my inventory forever, moving on to whatever is the next phase of the rotating inventory. This is by far the most fun part of this challenge, filling and emptying these rotating flex inventory slots as I hoard crafting materials, use them up, and then discard the extras. So yeah, that's my inventory. I'll do a couple more check-ins like this throughout the video. I thought it made sense since the whole point of the challenge is me managing my inventory without any storage chests. Okay, so it looks like my jungle raid in the corner has come to an end, so now it is crafting time. Or at least it would be, if not for these goblins that have invaded. I fight off the first few with my Light's Bane, but even this thing, which was so overpowered in the jungle a minute ago, is struggling against the goblins. I needed an upgrade to the Blade of Grass, the jungle sword that I could now make after my big jungle raid. I managed to get one in the middle of the battle, and then the rest of the fight was smooth sailing. I found the Blade of Grass to be quite effective against the goblins due to its thorn projectile applying the poison damage over time effect to basically all the goblins at once. Now that things had calmed down, it was crafting time. With all my stuff, I crafted a complete jungle armor set, as well as the Axe of Regrowth. During this crafting spree, I was also scrutinizing my inventory and trying to get rid of stuff. For example, I converted my cobwebs to silk and made some beds to clear up that slot. I also got rid of my spores and vines, having completed my jungle crafting, but kept the stingers to use later for flasks of poison, as I plan to do a mostly melee playthrough, so flasks would take up an inventory slot for the rest of the game once I got them. I noticed that I had an extra staff of regrowth for some reason, and got rid of that. I checked on my herbs and ended up getting rid of Deathweed, which I wasn't going to use for potions, and I would have gotten rid of more, but I needed Waterleaf and Fire Blossom for Obsidian skin potions for when I got to Hell eventually. Then I was also able to buy my first pylon, which was awesome. I got rid of my chains as well, knowing that I would want to use them for heart lanterns, but with practically infinite lead at this point, I could just make more later. So yeah, I wanted to go through all of that as an example of the sorts of decisions I was constantly making now that my inventory was pretty much full to the brim. It was quite fun focusing on these crafting recipes and optimizations. The next breaking news was that the Dryad had just moved in. She was actually selling the jungle pylon, so I went ahead and got that, allowing me to teleport from here back to spawn if needed. But more importantly, she was selling the long-awaited planter boxes, allowing me to create a nice garden and clear all the seeds out of my inventory, freeing up multiple spaces. My next target in terms of bosses was the Eater of Worlds. This boss would be more of an actual fight compared to the Eye of Cthulhu, so I harvested some sand, made glass, made bottles, filled the bottles with water, and then used them to craft some of those iron skin and regen potions to amp up my defenses. Using bombs to clear Ebonstone and the Blade of Grass to stay safe, I constructed a lengthy platform down in the Corruption Chasm that would be my arena for the big wormy boss. My melee Blade of Grass was a good choice for the fight because it would be able to pierce multiple segments of the boss with each swing and apply the poison damage over time effect to many segments, multiplying the DOT many times over. Alright, so I bombed 3 Shadow Orbs and the fight began. The most important outcome of the Eater of Worlds fight was of course the shadow scales for crafting. I used them to make the Speedy Nightmare pickaxe, which would greatly accelerate my mining, and I was about to make the shadow armor as well, but I noticed that I did not have enough scales left and would have to defeat the boss again, which I promptly did. So I was able to make the full shadow armor set. Having crafted everything I need, I sold the remaining Demonite and shadow scales. I also did a few other inventory shenanigans, such as selling my gold bars since all I really wanted was the ores. Now, you may have noticed when I killed the worm that a meteorite immediately landed. That was the first time I killed the worm. The meteor armor and space gun combo is too good to pass up at this stage of the game. So, I headed down into the mines for some obsidian to craft the obsidian skull, which would protect me from the meteorite. Then, I excavated all that juicy ore from space while slaying meteor heads left and right. Luckily, I had not gotten rid of my Vilethorn yet, which is my favorite weapon to use against the meteor heads, because it can attack them through the blocks that are in the way. Returning home, I converted my giant stack of meteor ore into bars and crafted the full armor set plus the space gun, as well as the meteor hamax because I had plenty left over. I used the leftovers to craft some meteorite bullets, which, due to their bouncing properties, I was going to use to find some floating islands. But soon after I started, I felt too lazy to finish and thought, I'll just go find floating islands later if I get any gravitation potions. Instead, I wanted some action, so I decided to take on the first tier of the Old One's army. For some reason, everyone on YouTube seems to hate this event. I guess the issue with it is it's not really a skills-based challenge, it's more of a is your DPS cap high enough challenge. As for me, though, personally, I love this event. It might even be my favorite fight in the game. Just the way the enemies line up and you can really use your weapons to their full potential is super fun in my opinion. So yeah, after I finished flattening the area, I started the event and used the Lightning Aura Sentry to easily defeat the entire thing. And that's Old One's Army Phase 1 done. Next up was some more mining. This time I took a bed over to the snow biome to set up my spawn there, and headed down into the icy underground caverns, where I found a ton of loot. I got some diamonds and a life crystal here, another life crystal here right after, more diamonds, a third life crystal, a minecart track that took me quite a ways away into a marble cave, and then to a glowing mushroom biome, where I found, on the far side of it, another life crystal, and then the most important find of all, the Goblin Tinkerer. From this friendly goblin, I bought the all-important Tinkerer's Workshop, as well as rocket boots, and I also took the opportunity to sell off the diamonds and other stuff I had recently mined. Continuing along, I found another life crystal, a useless granite biome house, but also another life crystal, a disappointing mushroom biome house that looks cool, but sadly only had a cloud in a bottle, which I already had, and another minecart track that gave me just a little gold ore, but also led me to another granite biome. Then a fairy friend took me to yet another cloud in a bottle. After that, I surveyed the map to see all the ground I had covered, which was pretty cool. I ended up in this glowing moss cave with a useless chest, but also the final life crystal I needed for maximum HP. Then a granite biome with another life crystal, destined to become a heart lantern for me, for eventual boss fight HP regen boosts. And I also found a very rare and very useful heart statue that I think I ended up saving for the final boss. I found another minecart leading to even more life crystals, and my mining adventure ended when I blew myself up with a dead man's chest. When I respawned, I had to contend with another goblin invasion, which went down quite easily. Then I thought, hey, the night isn't over yet, why don't I sprint over to the dungeon and try to kill Skeletron? So yeah, I sprinted over there, and although I didn't have time for an arena, on classic mode and armed with the powerful meteor gear, even an amateur like myself handled this fight no problem. With Skeletron dead, the dungeon loot was waiting for me. Wasting no time at all, I constructed a house here to be able to set my spawn using a bed, and dove down. I needed a few things. First was the Muramasa, a necessary component of the godlike Knight's Edge, since at this point I was definitely planning on a Terrablade endgame. Second was a pile of bones to use for Skeletron Prime summoning in hard mode. And third was a bewitching table to give me more summons for secondary damage. Personally, I am a huge fan of the late game hybrid builds, especially melee plus summoner using the Old One's Army Valhalla Knight armor. So yeah, that was the rest of my plan for the endgame, and so bewitching table is necessary. I ended up getting all of these things and found the mechanic as well. The bewitching table was the last one I found, and once I got it, I was done with the dungeon for good. Something I did not mention was that I found some gravitation potions down there as well. I headed up to the Sky Islands immediately, where the most valuable things I got were a lucky horseshoe and a red balloon, which I could combine with my cloud in a bottle for the horseshoe balloon. Anyway, enjoy some footage of me floating around in space, featuring the world premiere of my new composition for violin and piano, Floating Around in Space Waltz. With that out of the way, I next improved my future pylon network with some new desert houses, and I reorganized who was going to be living in both the desert and ocean, allowing me to purchase the ocean pylon and the desert pylon when night fell. I also designated the tinkerer and mechanic to live in snow, which would allow me to buy the snow pylon later. Okay, and then it was time for another boss, the Queen Bee. I headed straight for a beehive that I had already discovered. I made a rudimentary arena outside the hive in the more open space of the adjacent cavern, which would make the fight easier. And once again, the meteor armor and space gun combo would carry me through this fight due to the space gun's fast projectile being able to hit the nimble queen and pierce through her bees on the way to its target. With bee wax from the queen, I was able to craft the hornet staff, a huge upgrade to the finch. After that, I noticed that the witch doctor had moved in, and I was able to get the imbuing station, unlocking the ability to craft flasks for all my future melee weapons. I started with flasks of poison since I had been saving stingers from the jungle all this time. I bought the snow pylon next, and then I was pretty much done with pre-hard mode, so it was time for a elevator. I got distracted with some caves and minecarts and spider caves, and along the way I got Hermes boots, at last allowing me to upgrade these to Spectre boots. Continuing with random tasks, I bought pumpkin seeds from the druid and planted a huge pumpkin garden with the intent of making pie later. I had made my elevator near the left ocean because I was also trying to use it to locate the Shimmer. I realized I was probably digging too far from the edge of the world, so I tunneled over to a spot directly under the ocean, and sure enough, I found the Shimmer without further trouble. There was this crazy moment where I opened the map thinking I had failed to find it yet again, and I was literally about to leave, but then I dug only 3 more blocks down and found it, so that was crazy. I wanted houses down here because the Goblin Tinkerer's prices decrease if he's in the cavern layer, since that's his favorite spot, so I constructed some homes for the Goblin and Mechanic. Then I used the Shimmer for some upgrades, the Vital Crystal and the Ambrosia for starters. I also got the Arcane Crystal, not that I was planning on playing as a mage at all, but just because why not. Weirdly, it got stuck under a rock, so I had to dig this random passage to get it. I did some more shimmering. First, I converted my meteor stuff back into meteor bars because I had transitioned to the bee's knees as my ranged weapon of choice, so I didn't need the meteor stuff anymore. I also had picked up an extra Eye of Cthulhu summon from a chest somewhere, which, since it can also be made with lenses, was swiftly dunked in Shimmer and converted into 6 lenses, which I would need for the twins summoning item in hard mode. With these lenses, I was now ready to craft all 3 mechanical boss summons. The last Shimmer play I made was taking the 80 plus recall potions I had saved all game long and converting them into essentially an unlimited supply of Dayblooms. These I could use to make an essentially unlimited quantity of Iron Skin and regen potions, making all future fights easier from a defense perspective. My pumpkins were ready now, so I harvested them, made pie, and then planted another round. I did some more inventory management and saw that I forgot to decraft my space gun and meteor hammocks, so I headed back to the Shimmer, accidentally fell in, came back again, and did my last shimmering for now. Now it was finally time to go to hell. I made some obsidian skin potions, and then continued excavating my elevator. I ran into some trouble with the lava and accidentally flooded my tunnel, so I left, stopped at the Shimmer cave to get the cavern pylon, and connected my Shimmer area to the elevator. And then I rerouted around the lava and at long last reached hell. I immediately started work on a platform for the Wall of Flesh, and then, after establishing my foothold down here, I chugged my obsidian skin potions, I keep saying obsidian skin potions, and just mined Hellstone for a long time. Then, being the dummy that I am, I stared at the crafting menu for a solid 10 seconds before realizing that I forgot to get a Hellforge, which is required to actually make the Hellstone bars. So anyway, I returned to Hell and continued on my platform with the intent of finding a Hellforge to use. And yeah, it was pretty fun actually constructing this and just slaying monsters left and right with the bee's knees. I always enjoy exploring Hell for the first time because it feels like I am powerful enough to survive if I pay attention, but I am still at risk of being overwhelmed. At one point I obtained the Demon Scythe, and I never used it, but just check out how cool it looks with the footage reversed and a double speed. Simply epic visuals. Anyway, I kept going for a very long distance until I finally found a Hellforge. Next was a long series of random tasks. I harvested Dayblooms from my garden, extended the garden to accommodate more seeds, purchased a Pygmy necklace for more summons, which gave me both more fun and more power, crafted Hellstone bars, went down into the mines to get more obsidian so I could finish making Hellstone bars, found this extremely lucky find, a lava charm, got even more obsidian, shimmered the lava charm into a magma stone, allowing all of my melee weapons to inflict a fire damage over time effect, finished making Hellstone bars, and crafted the Volcano Sword, the Molten Pickaxe, the Imp Staff for a better summon, and a full set of Molten Armor, and the Molten Fury for a better ranged weapon. Finally, I descended into the Corruption for the ultimate pre-hard mode upgrade, the Night's Edge. I returned to Hell to finish the bridge, and I explored some of those little houses that are down there. I found the Dark Lance and the Sun Fury, both of the pretty good Shadow Chest melee weapons, which I considered using, but nothing compares to the Night's Edge, so I did not end up using them much at all. And now, at long last, it was Wall of Flesh time. I used all my different potions, and the fight began. And with that kill, hard mode has begun. There's a lot of stuff to do in early hard mode. The first thing I did for some reason, actually, is farm spiders. I mean, the spider stuff is fun, but I don't remember why I chose to do this at this exact moment. Anyway, I also realized that I would need more houses for some new NPCs, so I built a little floating apartment complex over here near my spawn. After this, I killed the wall again to get more starting loot before moving on to the rest of hard mode. I finished up my spider grind using my fancy new Firecracker Whip from the second Wall of Flesh victory. I then crafted the fun spider summons, which would be a decent upgrade to the imps for early hard mode due to their stun locking abilities after they latch onto an opponent. Now, if you play Terraria, you already know what time it is. It's hard mode ore time. So I dove down into the Corruption and smashed a bunch of altars, and then I used my Spelunker potions to hunt for the ores down in the mines. Personally, I am a big fan of the Palladium armor set because it is quite easy to obtain and has a fun life regeneration mechanic, so I was happy to see Palladium generate in the world. but that's for later. First, I had to get the palladium drill, then mine some mithril. Side note, I did find this cool area. It's a marble cave right up against the side edge of the world. Cool! Get the mithril anvil, get the mithril pickaxe, mine some adamantite, and make the adamantite forge. Now, all this time, I was also mining any more palladium I could to find, so at this point I had enough for the full armor set. Now, I had some spare adamantite, so I made a repeater for another new ranged weapon, and I happened to get an Unreal Reforge on it, so I thought maybe I'll switch to ranged for a while. That's more convenient for the first few bosses anyway. So I used the Shimmer to switch my armor and accessories over to ranged, and then set off to continue gathering stuff. What I really needed was Souls of Light from the Hallow and Souls of Night from the Corruption in order to fight the mechanical bosses, but I was also interested in fighting Queen Slime, so I was hoping for gelatin crystals as well. I did find the Hallow and dug down to the cavern layer to start gathering stuff. I ended up in this medium-sized open area, fought a Mimic, which gave me the Philosopher's Stone, another great defense item for me to have, found multiple gelatin crystals, and then decided to create a few parallel hallways here to hopefully generate more enemy spawns in order to farm Souls of Light. So yeah, I spent a bunch more time down here just fighting monsters and hoping to get Souls of Light. I did get another Mimic which dropped a dual hook. I don't even know about which hooks are better than others, but I did slot it in over the Ivy Whip. Returning home after that grind, I sold off some stuff and then crafted the Charm of Myths. I noticed the Corruption was heading towards my base, so I dug a little ditch to hopefully delay it long enough just to beat the game and abandon the world for good. Next was some setup time for the early hard mode bosses. In another playthrough recently, I tried using minecart tracks and found that I really enjoyed using these for the Queen Slime and the Twins. I found that they made these bosses super easy. So I went ahead and spent some of my lead hoard to construct a long minecart track horizontally across a good chunk of the world. What I love about minecarts is that you can just sit in there and hold down the left mouse button, and the track is done quite swiftly. Okay, so here we are just before the early hard mode boss rush, so let's take another look at my inventory real quick. At this point in the game, the inventory was really streamlined and not at all a problem anymore. Honestly, I almost forgot that we were even doing a challenge. So in red, we have our hotbar still with the same stuff in it, but just more efficient than ever because we don't need any early game stuff like ropes anymore. We barely need platforms either, besides for arenas, but I do keep those on just as a way of storing wood. Also important to notice is that I still have the Knight's Edge, which I'm saving for further upgrades. Okay, then in green we have a large number of potions, plus ingredients being saved to make more. The garden with planter boxes was such a huge help earlier to clearing out my inventory of too many seeds. In yellow we just have my gelatin crystals. The category of boss summoning item is going to be a constant for the rest of the game. And finally in orange we have the saving for later flex crafting slots. Currently a lot of them are taken up by mechanical boss things, which is just around the corner. We also have Souls of Light, and pretty soon we will be adding all the other different types of souls once we visit the Corruption, and especially once we take down the mechs. Alright, back to the game. It looks like we just finished our minecart track and a simple arena for Queen Slime, so time for another boss fight. Alright, and Queen Slime is down easily thanks to the combination of a minecart track and any decent ranged weapon. I got one of the drops I wanted, the Blade Staff, for a more mobile and reliable minion, but I did not get everything, namely the gelatinous pillion. So I fought her again, didn't get it, fought her again, and got it. Now I can fly, and I didn't even have to go through the trouble of getting wings. I tended to my garden again before heading towards the new hard mode Corruption with the intent of farming Souls of Night. Unfortunately, the new Corruption had taken over my desert base, so no more desert pylon for me. But yeah, I dug down into the new underground corrupted desert in search of Souls of Night and Cursed Flames. The souls were needed for summoning bosses, and the Cursed Flames would be used for flasks, upgrading my very outdated flasks of poison into the much stronger flasks of Cursed Flames. I found this corruption grind to be way easier than the hallowed grind. Honestly, having the corruption overlap with the underground desert was fantastic, because although I think the enemies are harder than the normal base corruption enemies, that's not really an issue at all on classic difficulty, and so I have none of the drawbacks, and instead I get a huge advantage, which is basically a big open area with plenty of horizontal passages to walk back and forth, allowing for more enemy spawns. Overall, this was a hugely successful grind. Returning home, I found myself in a blood moon, so I started just fighting everything. The good news was that this blood moon also happened to overlap with a werewolf night. I don't think werewolves spawn every night, so it was great that they were spawning now with the increased spawn rates of the blood moon active. If I get the moon charm drop, I am one step closer to the fantastic celestial shell as a late game option. And yeah, I do get it, so now I will be saving this in my inventory for the rest of the game until I can collect the other ingredients. It was actually raining also, so I ended up with the fun Nimbus Rod, giving me better area control options, and enabling me to sort of camp out in one spot without getting overwhelmed. But the last and best news of the night by far was that I ended up with a Bananarang, a super fun weapon that I find to be quite strong. With this thing I could switch back to melee and make use of stuff like my flasks, while still fighting at a pretty long range. When the night finally ended, I sold a bunch of the Blood Moon loot, keeping only the Moon Charm, Bananarang, and Nimbus Rod. I even sold off my Unreal Adamantite Repeater, knowing that I had replaced its role in my inventory with the Bananarang. Some crafting was next. First, my new cursed flasks, and then some new boss summons to be used the following evening. I now had one of each since I had gotten a lucky mechanical skull drop from an enemy at some point. Now, I was in a bit of an awkward spot because I felt ready to fight the mechs, but I had to wait until night. I decided to hunt some wyverns in case I ever needed wings, and started farming pixies to maybe get the pixie wings eventually, but soon enough, night fell again, and it was time for some bosses. First up, the twins. I chose to do them first because my minecart would be effective against them. Alright, twins down! Wasting no time at all, Skeletron Prime was next in line. Skeletron Prime down as well. Looking at the time, I put off Destroyer until the next night because I didn't want to waste my summoning item and then run out of time. What I did have time for was some crafting with my new materials. I visited the arms dealer for illegal gun parts before the night ended and used Skeletron Prime's Souls of Fright to craft what is probably my favorite weapon in the entire game, the Flamethrower. I didn't use it too much because I needed to conserve gel, but this is definitely my weapon of choice against the Destroyer, so you'll see it in action soon enough. Next upgrade was a new minion, the twins themselves, from the Octave Staff. I had managed to collect a black lens at some point, so I knew I would go for this. I don't even know if it's more powerful than the enchanted daggers, but it is definitely more fun and hilarious to watch, so a huge upgrade in my opinion. Next, I thought, hey, what if I shimmer a bunch of torches purchased from the merchant in order to get infinite gel for the flamethrower? Sadly, I learned that this does not work because the torches just convert to aether torches, so that's my bad. And the final crafting thing for now was Excalibur, to be upgraded later. So I had to do something during the day until the evening, when I could defeat the Destroyer. I decided to attempt the Old One's Army Phase 2. It started off well with my Bananarang and Excalibur chewing through the weaker waves, but unfortunately I did not have any of the sentries at my disposal and my weapons were not quite the right fit for this battle, so I got overwhelmed and died. In any case, by this time it was the evening again, so I challenged the Destroyer to a fight. The Flamethrower made this easy with its piercing damage to attack multiple parts of the boss simultaneously, and its very fast and easy aiming took out the probes quite easily. And the final mech has been squashed. With extra time in the night, I swiftly challenged Skeletron Prime again, since I had crafted the Flamethrower. I needed more Souls of Fright, and the extra Hallowed bars would be nice as well. And then some Hallowed crafting, the full armor set and a pickaxe axe. I did a brief bit of grinding in the Hallowed to refill on Souls of Light, and then headed to what is basically the final exploration-based activity, the hard mode jungle. I was hoping for Life Fruit, Chlorophyte, and the locations of Plantera's Bulb and the Jungle Temple. I wasn't going to try too hard for Life Fruit, but any that I found would be nice to have. Returning home, I smelted those Chlorophyte bars and then used them to craft the only necessary Chlorophyte item of the run, the true Excalibur. Okay, quick inventory update by the way. I have all the same stuff as last update, but with the addition of tons of hard mode crafting stuff from the mech bosses, as well as the remaining Chlorophyte. At this point I was like, okay, what else do I still need before I can get rid of all this stuff? The answer was first, a few more Souls of Sight from a Twins rematch, and then the next great weapon upgrade, the True Knight's Edge. This gives me a fresh ranged weapon to replace the Bananarang. Next upgrade was the Avenger's Emblem. I like using this to benefit both my main melee weapons and my secondary minions. And with all my crafting done, I cleared out all these things from my inventory, leaving me with plenty of space and this quote-unquote challenge nearing completion. I then visited the Goblin to get a stronger reforge on my True Knight's Edge. And with these upgrades, along with a lovely faint pinkish glow from the Aether Torches, I thought to myself that surely, this time, I am powerful enough to defeat the Old One's Army Phase 2 on Classic Mode, right? Well, wrong. I got overwhelmed on Wave 7 and died. But there was a big development, which was that my partial victories had finally supplied me with enough Defender medals to purchase the Ballista Cane. With the ability to finally use the intended mechanics of the event, the sentries, attempt number 3 was a victory at last. And there we go, Old One's Army level 2 complete. After this, I actually did the entire thing 2 more times to stock up on plenty of Defender medals. These would allow me to get the next sentry before attempting Tier 3, so hopefully that would go much better later. As I've said though, this event is one of my favorite fights in the game, so I did not mind grinding it. After that, I simply ran around in the jungle searching for Plantera's Bulb. I fell to my death at one point because I forgot that I had unequipped my lucky horseshoe, but then returned and found the bulb. Now, I was lucky because there was already a sizable cavern adjacent to where Plantera spawned, but it definitely wasn't enough for the battle, especially for someone with my dodging abilities, or lack thereof. So I set to work excavating and illuminating a decently sized arena. This was still classic mode after all, so I don't need anything that huge. With all my preparations done, I began the fight. This fight did not go very well. I was mainly using the True Knight's Edge, and I struggle with this thing. There is a mechanic where the projectile, when you launch it, stays in the same position relative to your character. So like when you move the screen, the projectile also moves relatively the same. Which for me made it quite difficult to aim properly. I did win in the end though. And there's Plantera cut down. Now, I was thinking I could have located some more bulbs and farmed Plantera, but I was not in the mood, so I set my sights on the jungle temple and Golem. Luckily, I had already found the temple, so it was easy to get there. I arrived at the jungle temple and started cautiously working my way through it. The problem with the temple is all the spikes and traps alongside the difficult enemies, and my strategy was to just go slowly and mine all the spikes and pressure plates out of the way. I inevitably missed some pressure plates, but I did succeed in disarming the vast majority of the traps. Along the way, I raided the chests for Golem power cells and also solar eclipse tablets, since there were definitely a ton of solar eclipse drops I wanted. I did not find the enemies to be much of a problem on classic difficulty with both of my powerful melee weapons. Melee is sort of the best case scenario here, since the narrow passages of the temple necessitate close ranged combat. So yeah, anyway, I slowly made it through, and although there were a couple times that I nearly died, I did ultimately end up at Golem's chamber. I cleared traps and furniture, illuminated the area, and even got a Lizard banner to help out against stray enemies. I set up a platform and the usual campfire and heart lantern, and the fight was on. And I died. Although I came pretty close to victory. Well, since I died and respawned back at the surface anyway, I thought I might as well summon a solar eclipse to power up a bit, which would make the Golem rematch more of a piece of cake. There were a lot of things I wanted to acquire from this event. In order of importance, the main ones were the Broken Hero Sword, which would allow me to create the Terrablade, the Neptune's Shell and Moon Charm, 2 out of the 3 remaining ingredients for the Celestial Cell accessory, and the Deadly Sphere Staff, which is a big upgrade to the twins in both damage and reliability. This was a hugely successful event for me. I got both accessories very quickly, and ended up with the Terrablade in the middle of it as well. Sadly, it had the annoying prefix when I first made it, so I visited my good friend the Goblin to convert it to Godly, before using this thing to absolutely shred the entire rest of the event. The Terrablade solves all the problems I have with the True Knight's Edge, due to its very fast-moving projectile that does not have the whole moves with your character mechanic. It's just a super easy to use weapon, and it's fun that you sort of slowly build up to it all game long. Sadly, I never got the Deadly Sphere, but that's fine, it was the least important one. Returning to the temple, it was time for a Golem rematch. I had the Terrablade now, which should make it quite an easy fight, and I also put down my Nimbus Rod Clouds and Ballista Sentry for some extra random damage. This Golem immediately dropped exactly what I needed, the Sunstone, the final piece of the Celestial Shell. I did go back and try to farm Golem for the Eye of the Golem, but I did not end up getting it. Now, we have just a little bit more powering up to do before the final bosses. First up is the Old One's Army Tier 3, which I need to complete a couple times to amass Defender medals in order to purchase the Valhalla Knight's Armor, which will be our final armor set of the game. I purchased the most powerful form of the Ballista and started the event. And that's tier 3 done. Then I had to do it again to get enough defender medals. The Terra Blade was very good here because it just has high damage and some pierce and is so easy to use. Also, I forgot to mention this a while ago, but I had upgraded my flasks again to Venom Flasks, so applying this powerful damage over time debuff to all the enemies really added up. And now it was time for the final armor upgrade of the game, the Valhalla Knight Armor. Hallowed had carried me pretty far, but the Valhalla has it beat in most respects. I'll also take a moment for a final inventory status update. As you can see, the inventory thing continues to not be a problem at all. There is basically nothing at this stage in the game that you have to hold on to for an extended period. It's pretty much just weapons or accessories, and all you have to do is say, am I exchanging my current stuff for this or not? And so almost everything I have gotten recently has been sold for cash. So, weapons, check. Armor, check. Accessories, check. What was left before the final bosses? The only thing I needed was better mobility. I had been riding the Queen Slime mount this whole time, and it was starting to not fulfill my needs. I did pick up the Mothron wings during the eclipse, but that's not actually that good without a ton of other supplementary accessories, so I thought I'd stick with the idea of a mount and fight the Martians for a cosmic car key. So here we go against the Martians. I was lucky and got the car key after only a single invasion. This thing is not very fast or nimble, but it does have infinite flight, so it was just barely good enough for the remainder of the game. Speaking of the remainder of the game, we had a cult to disband, so I headed to the dungeon and fought the penultimate boss, the Lunatic Cultist. Alright, that guy went down, and wasting absolutely no time at all, I immediately began the lengthy fight against the Lunar Pillars. From these, I would obtain my last few upgrades, the Stardust Dragon to replace the very outdated Twins minions, and the Daybreak for the final boss fight. The Terra Blade was probably good enough for Moonlord, but I am comfortable using the Daybreak, and it is basically free to craft it, so I would definitely use that. Oh yeah, and one more thing about the pillars. One extra benefit of my armor is that it increases my sentry capacity, so I could actually throw down a bunch of ballistas to help with the crowd control. Okay, Vortex and Stardust are down, so I crafted and reforged the Stardust Dragon to help with the other two pillars. Here's another sort of fun strategy I used. So I had been placing my Nimbus Rod clouds down over the pillars to help eliminate them, and the clouds actually stay there for a few minutes, even if they are off screen. So I was about to die against the solar pillar, but I had my clouds down, so I just left to regenerate HP and waited for the clouds to finish the job. Then I was able to get the fragments and craft the Daybreak. I then reforged the Daybreak, and it was actually hilarious because I ended up getting Superior like 4 times, so I just accepted that my destiny today was to defeat the Moonlord with a Superior Daybreak. Knowing that the last pillar would trigger Moonlord to appear, I made one final bit of preparation, the heart statue from way earlier hooked up to a timer. Alright, one more pillar to go. I allowed my clouds and sentries to finish destroying the pillar and awaited Moonlord at my base. I'm going to show you the full fight, of course, but just a quick note, it went extremely poorly. I mean, you were going to see me get hit by just about every attack he throws at me, including multiple death rays. But classic mode is just built different and I somehow survived everything. I think the problem is I usually grind way more for better mobility, such as Betsy's wings, along with supplementary stuff. So I was very out of practice with the UFO mount. But yeah, we did win in the end. Here we go. And that's it, game over. To summarize this challenge, I would say that the inventory only no storage chests thing was very impactful early on in pre-hard mode, back when there were so many different things to juggle because I wasn't quite sure what I would end up doing. Like, I used to keep silver bars on me because I thought I might make silver armor eventually, but I never actually did that, so then those inventory slots were basically clogged for no reason. But once hard mode arrived, it became much easier to just tunnel vision on certain guaranteed items, and the inventory restriction was barely noticeable anymore. For example, late game, when I knew I was going to use the Old One's army stuff, all I had to do was fight that event several times and then buy the stuff. It was 100% guaranteed that I would get it. Alright, so that's my summary. I really hope you enjoyed the video and all of my music. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.